Hello, hello. Welcome to cEDH Budget Brews. I'm Tim, and tonight I'm joined by Brandon. Say hi, Brandon.
Hi.
I've been getting a lot of questions lately about what decks are kind of good starter decks to kind of introduce yourself to cEDH. So I wanted to go over one of them, at least for now, and that deck is Yuriko. And the reason why I chose Yuriko is that it's a Dimir deck, so you have access to blue-black, which gives you access to one of the best, most compact, easy to cast, easy to learn win cons in the form of Consult Oracle. The other thing with Yuriko, in addition to having access to Consult Oracle, is that Yuriko in and of it, that win con in and of itself, essentially just dodges most stacks. The deck isn't hurt by Curse Totem, it's not hurt by Null Rod, it's not really even hurt by half the rule of laws that get played. It also doesn't really care about tax effects very much because you only need 3 or 4 mana as a base to assemble the combo. And that kind of just makes it pretty effective at shrugging off those things. The other thing with Yuriko is that it plays relatively well into a Storm meta and relatively well into a mid-range meta as well. It actually just plays well into most metas, given the fact that your backup plan is just playing a bunch of evasive creatures and then ninjutsuing in your commander and burning everybody out while you're drawing cards. That's your basement. Main issue I've seen with Yuriko. Now again, I'm not a Yuriko pilot, but I have sat quite a bit across from it. Is that Yuriko has a hard time really getting going if you can keep the little dongers off the board, the little evasive creatures, thus leading to Yuriko not being able to connect. That is an issue. Also, being in blue-black, you're predominantly having to answer things on the stack. So once things are kind of in play, you have to, for the most part, play around them. Sure, you have access to bounce spells, but again, really just bouncing something is just, you're going to counter it when it comes back down or it buys you a turn. So those are the main advantages. The disadvantage is if the board gets clogged, your little guys get kind of eliminated. And then you also have a hard time answering non-creature permanents effectively beyond just kind of with tempo plays. With that, if you can kind of get going and build momentum and keep your little guys around and protect them, you will very, very quickly accrue cards and will very quickly start pressuring people's life totals.
Like kind of a snowball effect? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, you do get a little bit of a snowball effect. It is a little bit slower than, say, Winota, where Winota will just build up a lethal board in basically 3 or 4 attacks. Yuriko will take a little bit longer than that if you're leveraging that plan. Generally, you're just trying to buy yourself some time, pressure the life totals to get them out of ad nauseam range, essentially, and then use that to assemble a protected consult. You also do have a relatively healthy interaction suite in the form of Fierce Guardianship, Force of Will, all the usual blue counter magic. You've got all the black tutors, Vamp Tutor, Imp Seal, Demonic Tutor, those kind of things. You do have some card advantage. One of the best little pieces of tech is Chains of Mephistopheles, whereas Yuriko can play under it pretty effectively. But again, you just don't have any way to answer things for the most part once they're down. You really have to answer them kind of on the stack. And Yuriko does kind of have a hard time reliably interacting with creature-based combos. So Emil Dockside is a big one. Just simply because you don't have you have removal, but you just don't have a ton of ways to really, if they can protect it at all. And you are slower than your opponents. Any other questions?
For instance, one of the ruling things that I've come across a few times is, does Yuriko get around something like a tax effect whenever you're playing her with her ability?
So, as far as I am aware, and again, don't quote me on this, Yuriko is an ability, so therefore it can be stifled, but it cannot be, it's not casting it, it's just being put into play. So it gets around things like Drannith. So that's the other thing, is that Yuriko dodges like Op Agent pretty well. It dodges Aven Mind Sensor, it dodges Dranith. Like it just dodges all this hate pieces. It's just not fast. So it's really, really good against like stacks if it can get some creatures down and gain the momentum. But if it gets hindered early, it'll just fall behind.
One of the things that I see a lot of questions boiling around is, does Yuriko's game plans get affected with different stacks pieces? Because that's really what we're worried against, right? Are the different stacks pieces. So what would be beneficial against most stacks? So like I know there's Doomsday piles, there's Consult Oracle, burn things. So what do you think would be the best against most stacks pieces?
So I mean, obviously you have your counter magic suite against all of the non-creature stacks. And then against any creature stacks, you do have like removal in the form of like dismember, snuff out, things like that. You can also, and then you also do have bounce spells if like you just need to get rid of it temporarily. It's just, you need Yuriko down and you need Yuriko to connect to be able to get that card advantage. You don't have any other card advantage without that because you're not running Naws. You're not running Peer. You're not really on any wheels. You're not, only has Mystic Remora. So it's really wanting to leverage its commander. So if you disrupt that plan, it really hinders it. But the thing that's nice about Yuriko, and I was talking about this a couple of times, is that Yuriko has a very reasonable like skill floor to where you can start kind of gaining that mastery with it. It will scale very well as you kind of become a more competent pilot of the deck. Like a good Yuriko pilot, like a mediocre Yuriko pilot will be relatively effective, and a really good Yuriko pilot will scale. Also, the deck outside of the Tainted Pact mana base can be budgetized really well. The $500 version doesn't run Tainted Pact. If you throw like $100 at the deck, and I know that seems like a lot of money, but we're talking about cEDH, and you can have a pretty reasonable Yuriko build with Tainted Pact do relatively well in most metas. I would not say in a budgetless meta, but the same is pretty much true for any budget deck in a budgetless meta, like where there's like proxy in and everything.
But I was going to say, so like when you say that it's good for a for a starter, is it because her game plan isn't really stopped so easily? So you can just, if you're stopped, you can just keep going and keep going and keep going?
Well, it's a combination of things. It's relatively easy to pick up as a baseline. The main way you win the game is easy to learn. Your backup plan is pretty solid in the form of the Yuriko burn plan. It'll scale with you in skill because learning how to like manipulate your top deck and learn how to like do those little sneaky plays that you pick up by, you know, with more mastery of a deck or just more mastery of cEDH as a whole. Whereas not like trying to learn like a bunch of storm lines, you're just going to be a scrub till you learn them, right?
Right.
And then once you learn them, you'll be fine. But like getting there is painful. And you don't necessarily have that with Yuriko because your complicated backup line is your Doomsday pile. That's where your skill, like that's where you start really hitting your skill cap. But again, like, but by time you're really starting to master the difference between mastering that Doomsday and just getting the basics down is not a very wide gap, or is a relatively wide gap, but you can kind of pretty reliably, I think.
Right. It's about learning the steps. Is it safe to make an assumption that she's easier for more casual players who want to get into cEDH because she's more of a creature-based combo deck in terms of like your creatures that will provide you or help provide you your card advantage and things like that?
I would say she's a good starter deck for casual players wanting to get into cEDH because of the fact that like the lines are pretty linear. You're kind of also doing something relatively familiar because lower power levels generally tend to have a lot of board based and you tend to like fight on the board a lot more. Mm-hmm. So like doing the ninjutsu thing is not unakin to what you would do, like trying to do like deal combat damage and stuff, burn people out like that. It's also a relatively popular casual commander as well. There are people who like playing Dimir that would kind of move over into it pretty easily.
Could you provide a couple of different Doomsday piles for Yuriko?
So the Doomsday piles are actually in the primer. So I know like maybe like the simplest one, which is you play Doomsday. Generally you're going to want some type of Yuriko trigger afterwards. You're going to put Cataxian Probe in. So it kind of depends, but the consult pile is going to be Doomsday for Git Probe, and then you'll flip it. That reveals your Git Probe. You draw it. Well, you put it in a hand. Flip then you Git Probe. Get your Oracle. Play your Oracle, and then you have 2 or 3 devotion, and your pile's only going to be 4 cards because you'll have Yuriko to give you 1 blue devotion, and then the Oracle gives you 2. You can also further kind of shore that up if you have a little more mana by making the pile 5 deep, and then you go Git Probe, Tainted Pact, and then like Oracle a couple of cards down. Make the bottom card Oracle, Tainted Pact into the Oracle, play the Oracle. Basically using Yuriko to crack the pile, essentially.
Right. That makes sense. I do want to say that I have looked up some other Yuriko piles. The biggest difference between Yuriko's different strategies are mainly the Doomsday pile. Because if you're going for burn, your Doomsday pile is going to be mainly burn. If you're going for a consult, you're going to want things that draw a bunch of cards, things like that. So I did want to make other people aware of that in case they have those.
Yeah. And I just put the piles up on the basic Yuriko piles that they were quoting in the primer up on the screen. It says that the basic pile, the single trigger pile is Gush, Cataxian Probe, Lotus Petal, Oracle, Academ's Awakening. The other single pile is, these require triple black, 1 blue. The second one is triple black, 1 blue. Is Git Probe, Brainstorm, Oracle, Amber, Petal. So what you'll do is you'll Git Probe, draw your Brainstorm, cast your Brainstorm, pick up these 3 cards, put 2 Garbo cards back, play your Amber, play your Petal, play your Oracle. So those are essentially. And then there's another single pile that doesn't lose to a kill spell, which is 4 black and a blue, which is Git Probe, Village Rites, Oracle, Petal, Academ's Awakening. There's a couple other piles like where you can use Gush and you get Street Race. Those aren't always present in all the builds. And again, I'm not a Doomsday expert, but that can give you I would definitely consult the primer on the Doomsday pile, especially since I would personally consider those Doomsday piles to be the more advanced skills that you'll acquire. Like the basic MO will just be to assemble Consult Oracle, and then will be to gain card advantage through Yuriko at triggers. Whereas where you really start hitting your skill cap is by learning these different piles. Like, do I need to just burn everybody out? If I do, what burn piles do I get? Do I just pick up my Doomsday pile? If so, which one? And being able to navigate those.
That makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate you for showing me these piles.
Thanks for listening to me ramble for a few minutes here. If you like what we're doing, you can go to patreon.com /cEDH_budget_brews. Give us $1. It really helps keep the lights on. As you can tell, it's so dark in here. I need lights. Thanks again, Brandon, for joining me. And everybody have a good night.